Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's 5 o'clock. We'll start the session. My name is Rajlakshmi Chauhan. I am with the Department of Electrical Engineering. And today we will be talking about some common language errors and how to avoid them in the process of identifying them, how we should write certain components and elements in technical writing. And this process is which is called copy editing, right? And like I posted on Google Classroom, if you have joined this session, please also open on your browser or on your phone, slido.com. And I want this session to be interactive. If you have any questions in the middle of the session, please use the Q&A option. There you'll see on the bottom right corner 3 dots that has an option of Q&A. You can post your question there, or you're welcome to interrupt me and ask the question if it's really urgent. We will come to question and answer at the end of the session, but to keep the session interactive, I'll be asking you a few questions, and to get your responses, I need you to go to slido.com and enter this code 674062. And before we get started, I would like to first know the composition of this class. And there on slido.com, please, after you enter this code 674062, write your name. I'll be able to see you joining. And then please do write over here whether you are a PhD student or an MTech student or a dual degree student or an MSc student, or I have missed some program. Okay, great. So the reason we are studying technical communication is because at PG level, it is extremely important, since you are primarily research students. It is extremely important that you understand how the language of your technical content, whatever is the research output that you are documenting, how it should be formatted, right? And there are certain guidelines that it should follow, certain rules which differentiate it from, say, creative writing or conversational language, which we typically use. Like the one that I'm using right now is a conversational tone. But when you write a paper or you write a document, a technical document, there's a huge difference. So let's get started with that right away. People who are still continuing to join, I'll come back to the slide in case you have missed. Right now, the code is 674062. So let's get started. Thank you for joining slido.com. So we'll start with the common errors in technical writing. The first common error is incorrect grammar. We all have studied this in school, but the moment English 2 or English 1, whatever it is called, English language is over, we sort of forget about it. And we do not notice it until somebody points it out. First such grammatical error is run-on sentence. Right? When you have 2 or more independent clauses, but instead of treating them independently, you kind of tend to just join them through a comma. So for example, the results of the study were inconclusive, comma, therefore more research needs to be done on the topic. How do you decide that something is an independent clause? It itself is a complete sentence. That means you could have just placed a full stop after that clause and it's a complete sentence, right? So you notice that there are 2 complete sentences. Therefore, more research needs to be done on this topic is a complete sentence. You cannot simply just join them together with a comma. This is incorrect. This is a run-on sentence rather, right? Correct way of saying it would be the results of the study were inconclusive, full stop, therefore, comma, more research needs to be done on the topic. Or you could have joined 2 independent clauses also through a semicolon, right? Then also it would have been okay. Next, most common incorrect grammar that we use, typically in conversational style, it is okay to start a sentence with so or but and then, now, right? But in technical writing, you do not do so. For example, the denominator is complex, so it must be rationalized. For the sake of saying, this is okay, but for the sake of writing in technical writing, this would be incorrect. You could have written, therefore, it must be rationalized, or you could have combined it into one single sentence and said, and therefore must be rationalized. Right? Note that there is an and, a conjunction has been used to join 2 independent clauses. Also, a big no to starting sentences with so. or but. Another most common type of grammatical error that we use is misplaced or dangling modifier. What it means is that the word that you are trying to use to describe some other word, they are so, you can say, misplaced in their alignment that the word that you are trying to describe, it's not really clear what exactly were you trying to describe. So an example is broken and dusty. The garage had an old computer that was found by Clarence. So what is broken and dusty? It appears here that the garage is broken and dusty, right? Because the descriptor is near the word garage. So it gives a kind of a false sense that it's the garage that is broken and dusty. But no, we're talking about a computer. Broken and dusty, Clarence found an old computer in the garage. Still wrong, because Clarence is not broken and dusty. It's the computer that is broken and dusty. So this is still an example of misplaced or dangling modifier, right? A modifier which is misplaced in the sentence. A better way to write this would have been, in the garage, Clarence found an old computer that was broken and dusty. Or you could have said, broken and dusty, an old computer was found by Clarence in the garage. I don't know, perhaps, yeah, that also would have been okay. The point here being that the descriptor should be close to the correct noun that it is describing. And with that, let us take a question. So the code, stay there at slido.com, 674062, answer this question. You need to identify the sentence with the misplaced identifier. That means the one that is the incorrect form of sentence. The point that we just discussed, which of these following is not correct? Okay, it is the misplaced identifier sentence that you need to identify here. First point is covered in sweat. She arrived home and fell onto the sofa. Second, she arrived home and fell onto the sofa covered in sweat. Third is she arrived home covered in sweat and fell onto the sofa. Which one is incorrect?
Second one.
Don't say the answer here. Please mark it on slido.com. Also, please don't write the answer on chat. The questions that are from Slido, please respond on Slido only. And I see there are 153 participants here, but only about 57, 60 people on Slido. I'm going to wait for a little while because I need you all to respond. Again, people who are just tuning into this channel, please don't write the correct answer on chat. Please go to slido.com, 674062, and answer this question. Okay, 10 more seconds. Question is to identify the one with misplaced identifier, something that doesn't make sense or can be misunderstood, or something that is ambiguous. All right, I'll show you the answer. The first one is the incorrect one. Why? Because she arrived home and fell onto the sofa covered in sweat. It looks like the sofa is what was covered in sweat. Okay. When you say covered in sweat, she arrived home and fell onto the sofa, this is clear. She is covered in sweat. It's not the sofa that's covered in sweat. I see that some people are still answering the second option. It is not the correct option. It's the first one that is misplaced, just in case you're not listening, right? And the third one, she arrived home covered in sweat and fell onto the sofa. This is also fine. This is correct. So again, people are marking the correct option, like the one that was not misplaced. The question says you need to identify the sentence with the misplaced identifier, the one which was incorrect, the one that has a misplaced identifier. That is the first one, right? Okay, moving on. Another type of grammatical error that we do is in parallelism. Okay? Whenever there are two clauses or two parts of a sentence that are seemingly equal, that are seemingly parallel to each other, say, dialysis is a process that includes the removal of nitrogenous waste and correcting electrolytic imbalances and fluid overload. So what are two parallel elements here? the removal part and the correcting electrolytic balances. It is important that these two parallel structures should have the same grammatical construct. Meaning, if the first part was removal, right? It's noun, removal. The second part, the parallel part, also should have been noun. So instead of correcting, which is a verb, you could have said correction of electrolytic imbalances. So removal of nitrogenous waste and correction of, or you could have also said removing nitrogenous waste and correcting electrolytic imbalances. That also would have been correct. Okay? The only thing is that they both should be of the same form, either both nouns or both verbs or both in the same sort of voice or same sort of construct, essentially. Okay? This is what is called parallelism. This is also something where we very commonly make mistakes and we don't notice it. Another question. The quiz is of 30 seconds. Of course, the quiz is on parallel structures. So you need to read the sentence carefully and then select the correct option. The option which has the correct form of parallelism. So read the three options clearly. Okay, so time is up. I know that 30 seconds is a little less time, but let's look at the sentences, okay? I know 90 of you have responded. Some of you may not have responded yet. But what does the question says? You have to select the option displaying the correct form of parallelism, right? So first is science used to be taught by the textbook method, while now the laboratory method is used. So you notice that what are the two forms, two parallel structures here connected by a conjunction? The conjunction is while. Used to be taught, laboratory method is used, right? They are not same structure. They are not in the same voice. So first one is obviously incorrect. Let's look at the second one. Science used to be taught by the textbook method, while now it is taught by the laboratory method. Used to be taught, now it is taught. Same format. It is taught, right? It is correct. The second one is correct. Let's look at the third one. The textbook method was once used to teach science, while now the laboratory method is used. Was once used, now is used. Same structure. So both second and third are correct. I hope you are understanding where this is going, right? If there is any question, please do ask. We do have a leaderboard here. Shetty Swami, Rajdeep, Shruti, Vikas, and Meghna on top 5. Moving on, pronoun agreement, right? This is something that happens a lot with researchers, because when you are describing something, you of course know what you are talking about, right? When you use pronouns to describe, say, a process that you had, or an element you had, a variable, your algorithm, whatever you are describing, you know what you are describing, right? But the reader may not always know what you are talking about. For example, let's look at this sentence. Lasers have also been used to study the reaction by which nitric oxide and ozone make NO2 and molecular oxygen. It plays an important role in the chemistry of the ozone layer, blah, 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 right? So the point here being it plays. What is it? What is it supposed to describe here? Lasers, reaction, nitric oxide, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, oxygen. What is it here? Right? It is not clear. It may not be clear to the reader, to the reviewer when you write this in a paper. So a better way would be, instead of using ambiguous pronouns, rewrite it with something that clarifies the meaning. So this part was grammatically correct, if you notice, but there is a pronoun disagreement. It's a pronoun in ambiguity, rather. It's not clear, right? So we were talking about reaction in the previous statement. So this process plays an important role. So it was a reaction, the process of reaction. So it's helpful to clarify things like this. What kind of language should you use in technical writing? Formal, not colloquial, means not informal. Do not use contractions. You don't use don't or can't. You always write do not or cannot. Now the difference between which versus that Which is used to describe when the clause which is following the word which does not contain essential information, it only contains some additional information. However, that will be used when the clause which is following the word that conveys essential information. So to illustrate this, just look at these two sentences. Our office, which has 2 lunchrooms, is located in New York. No big deal. We have an office in New York. Additional information is that it has 2 lunchrooms, right? So even if this which has 2 lunchrooms, if this was removed from the sentence, it is still correct. Our office is located in New York. So there's just additional information, non-essential, which we just sort of slid into this sentence, the fact that that office has 2 lunchrooms. That was the use of which. However, the second sentence, our office that has 2 lunchrooms is located in New York, meaning हमारा वो office जिसमें 2 lunch rooms है, right? That one is located in New York. So the idea of having 2 lunchrooms for some reason is really important to this person. It is essential information in this sentence. So he or she says, our office that has 2 lunchrooms is located in New York. Okay, so conveying essential information. There's a difference, basic difference between which and that. Many a times information may not be essential and you can use them interchangeably, but when you want to emphasize something, you would want to use that. Difference between will, would, may. Typically, will would suggest that you are absolutely certain that something is going to happen. So unless that is not true, we would suggest would, could, may, might, would be a preferable form to write. But when you're talking about results and you are writing categorical results, do use will. Means it's okay, you use will, would, may, but do not use may when you want to sound confident. You may want to use will or would if you want to sound confident. The tense, again, it depends, but do not use, you can use present or you can use past, but do not use continuous, past continuous. You can use present tense, past tense, perfect. This was reported, this has been reported, this had been reported, right? But this is being reported or that is happening or this is happening, though continuous tense is not used. Redundant words, and I know as a former student myself, I know we love to do this because when we have to fill pages, we would want to reuse the words which mean the same thing again and again. Red in color. Can it be read in something else? No. Worst case, maximum possible error. Worst case error is the maximum error, right? The next one, introduced a new. This I'm going to let it slide because we still do this. Introduce a concept. We want to emphasize and we say introduce a new algorithm, but it is redundant. You should know this. Okay? But it's not that you shouldn't use this. It's okay if you use this once in a while. Another language error, use of voice and person. Try to use, usually you do not use active voice, right? You use passive voice. But even if you use active voice, you do not use first person as such. You usually use the third person. Like you wouldn't say, I then plot the graph between iteration and performance metric. You won't say I, you would use the third person and say the author has presented, or the author plots the graph, or you could say we have plotted if you were multiple authors, you're speaking on behalf of the authors. But if it's a single author, it would be better to write the author or the researcher. Right? Do not construct adjectives as you go. This also happens very commonly when we are, yeah.
Ma'am, but in academic writing, when we submit, I witnessed this when I was submitting something on Turnitin. So it highlighted my sentences that were in passive voice. So shall we not use passive voice while making some academic content?
No, passive voice is, in fact, if you notice, in many of the literature you will go through, a lot of content is in passive voice.
Yes, ma'am, but why then it is highlighted?
Let me find out. Because typically, although passive voice does sound kind of boring, but passive voice is largely popular in technical writing.
Also on Grammarly, it is highlighted if we use passive voice.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay,
Grammarly does the same thing. So I
let me
think it's
find out.
mostly because in such writings we can choose the tone of what we are trying to say. So if we choose like something that is giving information in Grammarly, then passive is actually allowed. But when you are like at describing something, then it does not really give the passive wala that prompt. So that is something I think that is very core on the algorithm part, but I still think a little bit of that comes from the language itself. And also there was another error that I finally like quite frequently see, and that is that you are using too much words in this. Like for example, sometimes we have to explain algorithmically. So like if I have to explain something like that, then I have to use words like to, as, something that is descriptive and just that flows into the sentence. Even those sentences are marked like that they are not providing clarity. So, what kind of words can we actually use, or how can we bifurcate a sentence into pieces, into segregate explainable pieces, which makes sense? That is something I frequently come up with. So, can you suggest something for that?
So I think as long as the sentence is grammatically correct, you should consider using Grammarly to improve the way you represent your content, right? So even if Grammarly is flagging some parts of your sentences, saying it is too many words, we'll have to actually take it case by case to see what could have been done. But as long as it is grammatically correct and there are no you can say there's no violation of certain accepted principles of technical writing, I think it's all right. Right. So the case that you are talking about, maybe we can take it offline and look at the sentences, but we do not have to always shorten and make concise every single sentence in a research paper. It's not practical, to be honest. Right. It is important that what you want to communicate is clear. It is grammatically not incorrect. It's proper. It is following the guidelines, and it is as concise as possible, as clear as possible. So let me go to Grammarly once and see these settings that you're talking about. I'm not very familiar with it, but let us take those cases you're talking about offline, right, individually.
One question I wanted to ask. The Grammarly says your sentence is too wordy. What is to be done in that case? You have said that
Maybe
we
you are
can take the.
using too many descriptors to define the same thing. Like, worst case maximum possible error was one such example. Using same words to just fill words and to describe the same thing, something that could have been described in a fewer words. I think that is what.
Can it suggests to break the sentence and make it two? Put a full stop. We have to break it
That
sentence or
also
put a
that
semicolon.
also could be done. Many a times when we are expressing any point of at least like a research outcome, we often tend to make very long sentences, right? So it is a great idea to break sentences into smaller sentences as long as you feel that the meaning that you wanted to communicate in that one sentence is complete. Like, person who's reading the sentence, after they complete the first sentence, they get some information before going to the next statement. Right? So it's a good idea to break sentences into two parts or smaller parts, but not too small parts.
Thank you.
Should not be oversimplified. All right. So speaking of improper adjectives, what I meant here was that as we go along, we often tend to manufacture certain words, which we start using as adjectives. So for example, I've seen this in one of the BTP reports. The application scope is limited. What is application scope? You wanted to say the scope of the application is limited, right? Application ka scope limited hai. But you cannot use application as an adjective as and where you want. Right? So it may need a few more words, but do not manufacture adjectives as you go. Next is possessive apostrophe. Everybody knows about it. Still lots of people make this mistake. It apostrophe is, it is. And the second one is the possessive descriptor, right? And of course, if you're using technical writing, you will not use its because you will not use contractions. Choice of words is important. We need to avoid jargon. But if you're writing for a very specialized journal, it is okay to use keywords that the readership of that journal would be familiar with. But if you're writing for a magazine, or if you're writing a report which people say you have a RPC with members, with maybe one member who's not exactly familiar with every single terminology that you use in your department, right? So it is always good to sort of simplify, avoid using jargon as far as it is possible. But in very specialized cases, please feel free to use the terminology that the readership would be familiar with. So for example, for the first year, the links with SDPC and HSE were not connected and all required OCS input data were artificially loaded. Thus, Cache22 and Merwin were not available. Non-computer science, non-data science person may not understand what this is. So if you were writing this for a magazine, you would have rather written, because some of the links in the computer system were not connected in the first year, we could not run all the software codes. Also, whenever you come across or you're proposing something, few terms of which may be unfamiliar to the reader, take some time, take one short sentence to describe what it is. For example, if I'm writing a paper on dynamic stochastic resonance, it is not a very commonly understood topic. For example, in the field of image processing, a concept of physics may not be very well understood, right? So I'll take a moment to describe that very briefly in one sentence and then move ahead. Also, it's like I have written dynamic stochastic resonance. In parentheses, DSR is a counterintuitive phenomenon of physics in a physical system. Sorry, there should have been a comma here. Once I have abbreviated this, then I can go on using this abbreviation throughout my paper without having to write the full form. Right? But once you should write the full form. And if you are writing in abstract, then in the introduction part, you have to do it again because abstract is often considered as a separate part. It will be indexed separately in the digital library. So it is not that you defined it in abstract, so you don't have to do it again in the introduction. Please do so again in the introduction as well, like at least once when you are abbreviating something. I'm sorry, I'm not able to see the questions right now, but I'll come back to them, don't worry. Also, spelling and typographical errors. Here, Grammarly and many other tools will be helpful to you. Commonly misspelled words, which we do not really notice that they're incorrect. But note that you should not always be dependent on Grammarly or on MS Word or LaTeX to suggest correct spellings. Always also try to write a few words with pen and paper to know whether you really know the spelling or not. Next is the use of period, that is a dot. A dot or a period must be put only after a complete sentence. For example, an independent clause, you can put a full stop after the independent clause. For example, important findings are summarized in the last section, full stop. Whenever you are writing bullet points, unless the point you are bulleting is not a complete sentence, it's not an independent clause, do not put a full stop after it. Right? Because a period is put only after a complete sentence or an independent clause. So if you wanted to write the steps performed in the study include noting observations, analyzing results, drawing inferences. I'm not going to put full stop after each of these points. I could have used some other punctuation. For example, I could have considered like this is one whole sentence. I could have used lowercase n, lowercase a, and lowercase d over here. And as if it was a sentence which I'm just representing in bullet form, I could have said noting observations, comma, analyzing results, comma, and drawing inferences. Because I'm writing it as a sentence, here I can use a period at the end of the sentence because I'm treating this entire thing as one sentence because I used those punctuations to denote. But if this is not what I was doing, if this is what I was going ahead with, right, there will not be any period after any of the bullet points. Next is comma. Again, there is this thing called the Oxford comma. which totally changes the meaning of the sentence. An Oxford comma is something that you attach after the last point, like, sorry, after the second last point in your list, just before the last and, right? So something, something, and something. So before the and, if you add this comma, this is what is called the Oxford comma. Now, what is the significance? How does it change the meaning? You may have seen a lot of memes about how placing comma changes the meaning, but how Oxford comma changes the meaning is what we are trying to see here. So, for example, we invited the rhinoceri, comma, Washington, comma, and Lincoln. So we are having a party and we invited the rhinoceri, that means 2 rhinoceros, comma, we invited Washington, George Washington, comma, and we invited Abraham Lincoln. Right? So using this Oxford comma here specifies that rhinoceri is a separate element, Washington and Lincoln, these are all individual separate elements. Okay? If we did not use the Oxford comma, and if we said, we invited the rhinoceri, comma, Washington and Lincoln, it tells us that one of the, we invited 2 rhinoceri basically. The name of one rhinoceros was Washington and the second one was Lincoln. Okay? So it totally changes the meaning. It does not communicate what you really wanted to communicate. Okay? This is what is called Oxford comma. And I would highly recommend that you use Oxford comma, especially in technical writing, to avoid any kind of ambiguity between what set of words, what phrases are meant to be, interpreted together and what have to be separated. What has to be treated as a list and what is not. So at this point, I'll have a question for you. Again, slido.com 674062. You're already there. 143 of you are already there. 40 of you are still missing. Okay. So you're ready? Your roommates are Joey and Chandler. You went out for lunch with them and a couple of other friends. Which of the following options is correct? Okay. Remember that your roommates are Joey and Chandler. You're going out with them as well as 2 more people. Which of the following sentences is correct? Timer is already running. Okay, time is up. Remember the context? Your roommates are Joey and Chandler only, right? You are going out for lunch with Joey and Chandler and somebody else, a few other friends, of course, from the series friends, right? So if you said the first option, today I went to lunch with my roommates, comma, Rachel and Monica, what does this suggest? The first sentence? It suggests that your roommates are Rachel and Monica. But that's not true, right? Your roommates are Joey and Chandler. Right? So the first sentence is incorrect because you wanted to say that you are going out with Joey and Chandler and a few others, and those couple of other friends were just Rachel and Monica. So the second sentence is what is correct, and this was to illustrate the use of Oxford comma. Okay? So of course the context is important here because both sentences are grammatically correct. But what was the meaning you wanted to communicate is communicated correctly with the help of Oxford comma than without it. Right?
Ma'am, in such cases where...
Yes?
Excuse me, ma'am?
Yeah.
Ma'am, in such cases where there are 3 people, like for example, it's Joy, like we had to mention 3 names over there, then how would we use the Oxford comma over there, ma'am?
Just before the last and. Would use the Oxford comma just before the last and. Because before that anyway, say you have item 1, 2, 3 and 4, right? So after 1, 2 and 3, you will anyway be using comma. After 3 also you will use the comma, which will be called Oxford comma, and then you'll say and 4.
Okay, so the comma before and will only determine the entire meaning. Other than that, nothing else
Yes.
will be there.
Yeah. Okay? Because in the previous case, when we did not use it, it looked like Rachel and Monica are the roommates. My roommates, like Rachel and Monica. It looked like they're together, right? This is one set having a joint meaning. But when you say comma, my roommates, comma, Rachel, comma, and Monica, means your roommates, Joey and Chandler, Rachel, and Monica. All 4 of you means all 5 of you rather went for lunch. I don't know why we did not invite Ross and Phoebe, but never mind. This is the leaderboard. Shruti, Sana, Justy, P could have written his full name, his or her full name, and Nisha. Okay. Next is capitalization. We know this already, how to use punctuation, but I've noticed this a lot in, especially in titles of papers. You need to capitalize only important words. Oftentimes papers would require you to use sentence case in the title, but suppose your journal or your conference requires you to capitalize each word in the title, right? There are still some journals like that. You would capitalize only important words, but not supporting words like something using XYZ. So using is a supporting word. Frequency based. So frequency F could be capital, but based B would be small. By so and so algorithm, like say coefficient routing by I don't know, some histogram equalization, for example. So by is a supporting word. By, and, these should not be capitalized. You already know that you need to capitalize proper nouns. But in the world and in the era of texting, many people forget to capitalize proper noun. As a practice, as PG students, start today. Whenever you are texting somebody, please use full stop and capitalization. Okay. I think that'll be a good start to make that as a practice. Next is hyphen n dash m dash. So hyphen we are already familiar with. Hyphen is what we have on our keyboard. But there are two more members in this family. What are they? Okay. So hyphen is used, you know this already. It is used to join two words to make one word. And in this, one word will be more important and the second word would be less important, would be supporting. So for example, time, varying. I joined the word time and varying. The moment I have combined this, this has become one single word, right? And time is the more important aspect and varying is like a description of this time. Statistics based. Statistics is the main thing and based is some sort of descriptor for statistics, right? So this is where you use hyphen. N dash, however, N dash, and actually there should not be a hyphen here, sorry. It is N dash. Consider this to be a hint for some future question that this hyphen should not have been there. Let us just consider it to be N dash. This is used, this is slightly longer than the hyphen, okay? And this is used to denote range of something to something. So when you write page number or you write January to December, the range that you express is through an N dash. Okay, you'll not find this on the keyboard, but you'll find this in the symbols. It also is used to denote connection or conflict between two equals. Remember in hyphen, one word was more important and the second word was less important, right? But when you have two equals, when you want to say, I am plotting the current voltage characteristics, right? So it's not that current is more important or voltage is more important. Current and voltage are two equal quantities here. You may not have done this, but you are supposed to use an N dash here. It can also be used as a hyphen when the word or when the element itself is a compound word or a hyphenated word. So for example, if I was saying award winning, right? Consider the first example, award winning. So just award winning, okay, nothing else. So award is the more important word, winning is the less important word. You'd have simply said award hyphen winning. But when we say National Book Award winning, National Book Award is sort of a compound verb, right? Compound word, sorry. So here, instead of using a hyphen after award, you would use a N dash. If the word itself is hyphenated, like ebook, you cannot use another hyphen here. So you would use a N dash. Ebook only website. Last is M dash. This you must have seen very commonly in grammar books growing up. M dash, this is the longest dash, right? And this is used in place of comma or in place of parentheses for emphasis, for the purpose of emphasis. Meaning that if you had completely removed the portion which was within the parentheses or which was within these M dashes, the sentence is still correct. But what is within these M dashes is just additional information or for emphasis. For example, and yet. So note that and yet, this would be in creative writing, not in formal writing. So don't think that this can be a part of technical writing. No, you would not start a sentence like this. You would say, and yet, when the car was finally delivered, nearly 3 months after it was ordered, she decided she no longer wanted it. Even if you did not have this part, and yet when the car was finally delivered, she decided she no longer wanted it, right? So it is just for extra emphasis. You could replace this with commas, doesn't make a difference. You could replace this with parentheses, doesn't make a difference. Next, very important, formatting of mathematical terms. If you are using LaTeX for document processing, typically in equations you would have imported, you would have called certain functions that will automatically format your mathematical terms. However, if you are using Word, right, it is important that you know how to format mathematical terms. So if you have a mathematical variable, you always italicize mathematical variables. Be it in the text, we are saying, let us define a variable x. So that x is a variable, you will italicize it. You do not italicize numbers. You do not italicize mathematical operators like plus, minus, parentheses. You do not italicize them. You also do not italicize mathematical functions, meaning like log, cos, sine, exp. These are all mathematical functions. These are not italicized. So iteration count, comma, n is italicized. The ith element of the array yi. So y is also italicized. I was the variable I is also italicized. Note that you could have simply bold-faced a letter. You didn't have to italicize a variable if it was a matrix, right? Or if it was a vector. You don't have to italicize, but then there you have to bold-face it. You have to do some formatting to show that it's an array or a matrix. Maximum frequency, F max. I have not italicized max over here because max was not a variable. It was just a compression or compaction of the word maximum, right? You could italicize it. It's not incorrect. But even if you did not, this would not be incorrect because this was not a variable. What is the problem in this equation now? Y is equal to m 5x plus c plus 20. Anyone can unmute and tell me what is the problem here?
Constant.
Sorry?
Ma'am, M has to be italicized.
Okay.
20
M
should
has
not
to be italicized.
20
And
should not be
now is it correct?
5 and 20.
The
5 was
parentheses.
italicized.
No, ma'am,
Parentheses,
the
okay.
operator should be.
Operators should also be not italicized, right? Now it is correct. Okay. What is the problem here?
Log, the cos.
Log and cos.
Log and cos. Anything else?
And then X and A and B.
Yes. Also, it's a good idea to insert one space between before and after this operator, plus operator or minus operator. All right. Spacing and formatting. People know this, but still end up doing this error while writing emails, while writing anything. Space is needed before an opening bracket, okay? It is not needed after an opening bracket. It is not needed before a closing bracket, but it is needed after a closing bracket. Similarly, colon ke baad you need to put a space, not before usually. It is after a comma that you need to put a space, not before a comma. Like the word comes, you put a comma and then you put a space. Okay, don't put a space before comma. Also, actually half a space is needed. I don't know how to put half space. It's needed between the word and its unit also. Also use SI units. Good idea would be to spell out small numbers. You avoid starting a sentence with a number unless it's a very large number like 1000. You would write TEN, 10 participants took part in this study. Use the correct SI unit. We study this in college, school, and then we forget. that the SI unit of time is seconds, but the symbol is S, not sec, right? So it is 10s, not 10 sec. Whatever details you have, you use them wisely. Do not do not over explain, but do not skip important information like what is the unit. You're plotting a graph, for example, make sure that in the axes you do write the variables, you do write the unit of those variables as well, right? Like quantity and the symbol. Like this is a graph, so one axis is showing output voltage in volt, or it is showing iteration n, something like this. Also, when you are using specification, depending on how your sentence is formatted, you will either use a hyphen or not use a hyphen. So when you are saying a resistance of 10 ohms, 10 ohms, 10 is just an adjective for ohms, right? Describing how many ohms. But when you say a 10 ohm resistor, this whole word 10 ohm is an adjective for the word resistor. That means 10 ohm has to be one word. It has to be hyphenated. Okay? So for example, 10 battery sources of 3 voltage is fine. But 10 3-volt battery sources, meaning 3 volt is an adjective. It is one word, should be hyphenated, describing the battery. Also, very important, please always check your article for plagiarism using a plagiarism detection software. I don't know whether plagiarism has been covered already, but please make sure that you always submit original entries. Okay, so one more question on Slido. What is the correct representation of these words? Which of these is correct? This is very easy. Come on. Okay, so 10 30-second interval, the hyphenated one is the correct answer, because some 30-second is now an adjective to adjective for the word intervals. So it has to be one word, has to be hyphenated. If the sentence had said 10 intervals of 30 seconds each, then no hyphen was needed. This is the leaderboard. Congratulations, Pooja. This is the copy editing exercise essentially, where whatever we have learned so far, right? And in how sentence should be explained, identifying grammar errors, all these have to be fixed. So if you look at this paragraph right now, it's okay if this is not from your area. It doesn't have to be. Just think of a regular user and try to rewrite this. This is just an example that I'm using here in class. This is not the exercise for class. Okay. So it says, let us understand the meaning. It says, a e-spirit based algorithm. So a e-spirit, anyway, there is, you can see that the article is incorrect, right? So it should have been an, but still the whole sentence structure is very confusing. An e-spirit based algorithm for joint estimation of DOA, we have no idea what is DOA, and polarization using electromagnetic vector sensor uniform circular array, that is a mouthful to say, is proposed in this paper finally, right? This is not a good construction of sentence, right? We'll have to do something about it. But what the paper is basically saying is that e-spirit may be some concept. So they are proposing an algorithm which is based on that concept for estimation of something which is DOA. We have no idea what is DOA, and you need to like estimate DOA and polarization using this long term, which is later, if you notice, is used again and again in this abstract. So a better way, a simpler way to simplify this would be to abbreviate it. We'll come to that in just a moment. Right? Now what they say is, e-spirit algorithm fails to work using electromagnetic long word, since this algorithm requires data received by the array to possess certain rotation invariant structure, but EVSU whatever does not have that. So what is the problem? They're saying that this estimation has to be done by e-spirit based algorithm for this particular kind of array, but e-spirit algorithm needs that whatever data you're receiving is rotational invariant. But because this particular array doesn't have that feature, you cannot use the e-spirit. Right? That is what they have identified as the problem, although written in a very difficult way. Concerning this issue, The proposed algorithm utilizes the fourth order equivalent to obtain something, something, something. So they're explaining how they solve this problem. And then they construct, again, starting a sentence with then doesn't seem very correct over here, like at least in this flow. We'll see what to do. Then construct pairs of subarray with certain, then utilize eSpirit. So basically what they're saying is that they would do something to make it rotation invariant and then use eSpirit. And then proposed algorithm is some closed form parameter estimation technique. It can reduce computational complexity. Finally, they have also shown that efficiency is demonstrated. So the meaning, unless I explain this meaning to you, it will take a lot of time for any reader to make sense of what this is, right? So this is not good writing and it needs to be fixed, needs to be copy edited. So let's take it one sentence at a time. This we already understood. There's a very complicated words which are used again and again. I'm going to rewrite it. We have no idea what DOA is. In communication systems, let us give a small introduction. In communication systems, the direction of arrival and polarization of signals for a linear array are often computed through this eSpirit. So I've written the eSpirit thing full, and then I can reuse eSpirit now. So people know what this is. However, since eSpirit algorithm relies on rotational invariance, it cannot be applied to electromagnetic vector sensor arrays. And because we know this is going to be used again and again, let us take the moment to abbreviate it here so that we don't run out of breath every time we have to say it. Concerning this issue, ki jagah better hoga to say to address this limitation, because we just pointed out a limitation, right? So our paper has to sell the idea. We are trying to say that, we are the ones who solve this problem. So to address this limitation, the proposed algorithm utilizes something virtually extended EVSA having a uniform circular distribution. Then you explain by obtaining pairs of rotation invariant subarrays, the proposed algorithm can then utilize the eSpirit algorithm, because you remember eSpirit used to work only on rotational invariant arrays. So the language has been changed. And instead of having a second sentence that started with a then, we have changed it and said by obtaining pairs of rotational invariant subarrays, the proposed algorithm then utilizes the eSpirit algorithm and parameter pair matching to estimate the DOA and polarization of the incident signals. The sentence is okay. The proposed algorithm is a closed form parameter estimation technique. And instead of saying could, once you have done the experiment, why would you want to say could? You know whether it can or it cannot, right? So you better to write can assertively, effectively reduce the computation complexity. And the last sentence, of course, can be rewritten. Instead of finally, you can say the efficiency of the algorithm is demonstrated through experimental simulations, right? So this is a simplified form of that exercise, that copy editing paragraph, which makes a little more sense. Of course, we must know it is not just one correct way of writing it. There are many, many correct ways of writing it. This is just one such way that I've shown. Okay, you could have rewritten it in multiple other ways. Citation and references, few things you need to remember. When you are referring to something in text, you do not, like when you have something in parentheses, what we said was even if that was not there, it should still make sense. The sentence should not be grammatically incorrect, right? So instead of saying as reported in two, you would say as reported by, if there's a single author, you will say M. Geller, write the year. Of course, write the reference number also. If there's only one author, you will write the full name or just the last name. This is also fine. Initialize the first name and the last name. If there are two authors, you will just write the last names of both the authors. So as reported by Geller and Bing 2005. If there are three or more authors, then you will use the last name of the first author, et al. Okay? Et al means and others. So alia, this is compact form of alia. So do not put a period after et. Et itself is a complete word, which means and. Okay? So it means Geller and others. So last name of the first author, et al. If there are three or more authors, only then. Okay? Also, whenever you see any references, make sure that certain fields are present. Otherwise, it will be considered as an incomplete reference. Author name, title, name of the journal or the name of the proceedings, volume number, issue number. Volume number or issue number may not be there in a conference proceedings, but it should be there in a journal. At least volume number should be there. pages and year should also be there. If it's a conference, the place where the conference was held should also be there. Okay, so please find out more about this when you actually study the topic of referencing, which was not really a part of this lecture, but because I have included this in the exercise, this will come on your Google Classroom in just 1 more minute rather, right? And what you need to do is, a document has been created for you. You have to copy edit this based on what we discussed today. Make sure that the references are complete, means nothing is missing. You can fill entries from your side, like you can manufacture volume number, you can write whatever, but make sure the references are complete. And the copy editing, you basically have to do copy editing of this one paragraph. You need to do this before September 30th. Okay, if you have any questions, do write to me. Last message from me to you: how not to avoid plagiarism by paraphrasing. Do not just simply rewrite or change the order of certain words and think that, oh, I have paraphrased, it is no longer plagiarized. No, there's a different way of paraphrasing, again, not beyond the scope of this lecture, but it is very important as researchers to remember not to plagiarize. Okay, and be very careful. I hope you enjoy this course ahead. Please always proofread your document as many times as possible. Make your friends read your papers. If you feel like you have a fatigue, you cannot notice certain errors, this is my email ID. And if you have any questions, please do write to me. Thank you.